book and get explanation of that, I saw like 4 different books stacked up on his desk that he's reading, and I kind of got screenshots of those that have to do with depression, like material he's actually reading. So there was 4 additional books plus the material that you guys are using, plus obviously the word, right? Like he's always looking into his Bible for direction and information to teach there. But I just thought that was really cool, and a lot of churches don't have that, right? Like you've got a pastor who is spending time in his word, but also taking time to look into other things to get educated properly for things such as depression that can sometimes be more medical or other involved than just spiritual, right? So I don't know that everyone is always aware of the gift that you have here at this church, in that he is willing to put the time and energy and effort into what he does when he stands up here and teaches you guys. So I just kind of wanted to encourage you and let you know that for those of you who weren't quite aware of that. I'm going to sit down now and let Abby come and introduce herself and share a little with you.
Hello, my name is Abby Laura, and I am a board-certified family nurse practitioner at Baptist Health Deaconess here in Hopkinsville. I've been in practice here for a little over 14 years, so I really enjoy what I do. So Brother Joe asked me to come today to kind of talk on the medicine side of depression and what that can look like. So if you want to look in page 62 of your book, he started on this last week, so we'll just kind of get a little bit more in depth tonight. The top of the page says that depression affects the whole person, your body, your soul, and your spirit. And so my focus will be on how it affects your body. The symptoms of depression can really vary depending on the severity of the depression that someone's struggling with. The symptoms can be mild, but they can also be very severe. Some of the symptoms that you might notice: low energy, irritability, feeling very sad or hopeless, difficulty concentrating or making decisions, and a loss of interest in hobbies or activities that previously brought you joy. And then when you look at that, there's some bullet points on the bottom that talk about grooming the body. So the first thing they recommend is to schedule a thorough medical checkup with your provider. I definitely encourage that because there are a lot of organic things that can cause depression. Hormonal imbalances, things like thyroid disease, pregnancy, postpartum, menopause, those things can actually play into depression and symptoms that you may be experiencing. Other things that can also affect would be neurological diseases, Parkinson's, migraines, strokes, things like that. And then also autoimmune disorders, so lupus, rheumatoid arthritis, those types of illnesses, and then chronic pain can also cause major depressive disorder. Brother Joe touched on last week about talking to your doctor about medicines that you take, and if you see more than one doctor, if you have a family doctor and specialist, it's important to bring your medicine to your appointment so that they can see everything that you're taking. There are medications that interact with each other and can cause depression, so it's important for us to be able to look at all of that to make sure that we're not prescribing something that's interfering with what someone else is prescribing for you. Medication may be necessary for the treatment of depression. Something that I would encourage you to look into is GeneSight testing. A lot of providers offer GeneSight testing, and what that is a genetic test that actually looks at your genetic makeup and the way that you metabolize medications. So when we get those reports back, there are 3 different categories of medication. One means that you'll metabolize it well, you shouldn't have side effects, and hopefully it will do its job and help with the depression symptoms. The middle class it's a yellow category, and it means that the medicine may work for you, but you may need dosage changes to kind of get to that added benefit. And then the third category is what we call a red category. It means that you don't metabolize it well at all, and so we really recommend staying away from those medications. What I found in practice, GeneSight testing is newer. It's been around since the last decade. And previously, when I was early in practice, we would have patients come in and, they might be struggling with depression. We'd start a medication and typically have you come back in 4 weeks. And unfortunately, a lot of times patients would come back and they weren't doing well on the medicine, or they didn't feel like they were getting better. And when you're struggling with depression, it can be very disheartening to be taking something, it's not helping, start something new, that's not helping. So this kind of takes the guesswork out of medication for you. And hopefully you'll have more success with those medications in the future. So I definitely recommend that if you're looking at medicine for depression, jot that down. It's called GeneSight testing, and most providers are able to order that for you. Develop regular sleep habits. So sleep enables your brain to produce the serotonin, which helps alleviate the symptoms of depression. It's recommended that you get 7 to 8 hours of sleep per night. You can actually sleep too much, so we recommend trying to hit that 7 to 8 hour mark. Sleep 7 to 8 hours, or you don't sleep enough? Not enough. You can sleep enough. I love it. They do recommend that if you have difficulty with sleeping, falling asleep, that you eliminate screen time close to bedtime, so phones, TVs, things like that, turning those off and just trying to relax. It's definitely recommended. Regular activity is recommended, so 4 to 5 days a week, 20 minutes of activity. That can be a simple walk or an exercise routine if that's something that you enjoy, but that helps you to produce natural endorphins, which help alleviate stress and depression symptoms. And then something that's really important is eating a balanced, nutritious meals regularly. I think that's something that we don't think about a lot, so focusing on fueling your body for success. They recommend that you do a lot of protein, fruits and vegetables. Make sure you're drinking plenty of water. I'm guilty of not drinking plenty of water, but I'm trying to do better. And then something that we don't talk about a lot is that your gut health is actually directly related to your mental health. 90% of your serotonin is actually produced in your gut. And then another hormone called GABA is produced there as well. And so if your gut is not healthy and you're not eating a nutritious diet, you're not going to produce enough of those hormones. And with that being said, then it makes it more difficult for you to overcome the symptoms of depression. So things that we look at for gut health is you want to prevent what we call a leaky gut, and that's where bacteria can actually get into your gut, and it decreases the serotonin that you're able to produce. So you will see more depression symptoms. And actually, the leaky gut triggers immune responses and inflammation, which is heavily linked to major depressive disorder. So something that I definitely encourage people to look into is their diet and choices that they're making, and which is difficult. You know, we live in a fast-paced world, so. But if you're struggling with those symptoms, definitely looking into leaky gut and a more well-balanced diet. I think Sabrina's going to talk on, she does fresh milled flour, and which is really good for that. It actually helps prevent leaky gut. So that's something that I'm not good at yet, but it actually does make a big difference. But I think a lot of people don't realize that much serotonin actually comes from your gut. So it really affects your depression symptoms. And then another thing that's recommended is taking time each day for a stress-free activity like reading your Bible, praying, listening to music, journaling, spending time with family or friends. Those things are very important, so I would definitely encourage you to make that a priority in your life several days a week. So that is the medicine side. I think at the end, starting at 7 o'clock, we're going to do a question and answer session. So if you guys have questions you thought about this week or anything comes up that we've talked about, if you want to jot it down, and we're happy to answer questions then.
Yeah, in practice, so I love that I've got, and I need to use Abby more as a resource because honestly we don't see each other often and I forget, but I do not have I have some education on medicine side of things, but as far as what does what and how it works in the body and all the things, I just do not know. It's been years since school and it's not an area that I focus on, so I rely on people who are educated in that arena to help me assess when people come in and they're on a number of different medicines, because as she said, sometimes that could be the problem that we could kind of get ahead of. But assessment in my realm is very important when it comes to body, and that usually looks more like as far as diet and intake and what's going on, because I see so many people that come in that have gut dysbiosis, which, and I may be pronouncing that wrong, but leaky gut, or SIBO, or IBS, irritable bowel syndrome, all these other things, a ton of different autoimmune, which is going to be centered to gut health, and all these things screaming and going on. And so if we're really just trying to navigate the emotional piece of it, but not the emotional or mental piece of it, but not touching the body piece of it as far as how you're stewarding, right? If we're believers and we're Christians and we think about our body being a vessel, which we'll get more to, and we're not thinking about what we're actually putting in our mouth, right? If you had, I know very little about vehicles, my husband would tell you that, and I'm not super cautious of what gasoline I put in them either, but I know it matters, right? Like my son has an old Jaguar, and he requires the higher whatever value, the one that costs more, gasoline in that vehicle, and he cannot put the less in it or it will tear it up, right? And so there are things that we put in our body. I used to love Pop-Tarts. We'll use that as an example. We had them all the time in our household, right? Love them. Hot fudge sundae, it's my favorite, and they're the bomb. And so on the side of that box is a list of probably 50 plus ingredients that you cannot pronounce the majority of, and one of them is a bioengineered food item. What is that? Like, I don't know what that is, but I can tell you what it's not good for you, right? It's not what I like to call God food. And so if we think about depression, which I'm always going to kind of link anxiety to that, even though this class is specifically to depression, then it really matters what you steward, how you're stewarding, what you're putting in your system. And you don't have to change everything all at once, because it is hard based on the Western diet that we're so used to eating. But you can make small changes. It is just as important as any other piece of our walk when it comes to being a believer, to kindness, self-control, right? It's a fruit of the Spirit. And so it is possible. I just think sometimes we get too light about it and make jokes about it, and just seemingly we're always going to be in that space where we don't eat well, right? And that's just simply not the truth. So it matters, but that's all I will speak on that piece, because it could take 3 hours of y'all's evening. I did want you to know too, and Abby hit most of this, but I had written this down just from a definition. Serotonin is a vital neurotransmitter and hormone. It carries messages between nerve cells in your brain and throughout your body. Like, that's what it is. It regulates your mood. It helps control sleep-wake cycles. It manages your appetite. It triggers gut movements to aid digestion. Again, serotonin does all those things. I just didn't know that for the longest time. Like, I thought it just had to do with my mood, right? That was it. And then she mentioned 90% being produced in the gut. Like, those things are just good education to know, that, because then that's going to take you back to know, okay, the whole body really does matter when it comes to depression, when it comes to anxiety and those kinds of things. I had mentioned last week in the gratitude list, for those of you who were here, he had us share something we were grateful for, and I mentioned a new kitchen. And my husband thought that was hilarious. It was not at the top of my list, by the way, but it was on the list of 10, was it 10 items? 7 items? 7, okay. It was on the list of 7, and he had salvation, right? I saw salvation on his, and I had new kitchen. They weren't side by side, but it's just what was there, and I kind of laughed. But what I did want to say in that, right, sometimes I believe in the Christian culture, because that's my audience tonight, so it's what I want to speak to, that we can sometimes over-spiritualize some things. And so when we do think, like when you're struggling to go through something in your life that could be leading you or moving you toward depressive symptoms, whether it's diagnosed or whether you just have any of the symptoms that Abby just listed, then it is very good to be aware of what your mind is going to, right? Of where you're spending your time and your thoughts. And so in that, in a season where I was in a place like that, we created what I call the Thankful Game. Called it that for years, still call it that with clients today. But it literally saved our life in a place to where all of my kids and I would sit in a circle, and we'd be required to share 3 things you were thankful for. And when we started, it was miserable, and nobody could really come up with one other than like oxygen, right? My bed. They had no real personal examples. But as time went on, that wiring in their brain began to shift, and they began to be more focused on the positive things happening around them. So it would be conversations like, oh, a friend came up today and shared this with me, right? It was just specific to the day. And so that new kitchen example, I think, is a good example of something that's just materialistic, right? It really could have nothing to do with the Lord, but it's something going on in my life, right? It is something that I get to walk into and use every single day. So is there still gratitude for it? Right? Am I aware of why it's there, why I have it? It all should trace back to the Lord, right? Every ounce of it. So even a new job, even a nice meal, whatever it is you're grateful for, those things are going to wire your brain and produce the things and the chemicals that need to be pumping and put you in a better place body-wise, right? So don't don't ever think that it needs to just be limited to those more spiritual, more holy sounding, I guess might be the right word, things, because all of them actually matter. On page 67, and we're just going to try to follow along with this book the best we can. He asks us to kind of speak to what we do, but using the book as well. And you'll have to bear with me with books and a microphone. I feel like I'm juggling. I'm going to grab my phone. It might hold that in place. All right, so I think where he stopped the other night was the will. And so we're going to look at that for a moment. He also mentioned oppression, like a spirit of oppression, and I thought that that was kind of really good that he brought that up, because and Abby hit on that, while medicine is needed, like I see clients oftentimes, and if we're not moving in 3, 4, 5 weeks, or there feels like this stuckness for something that's going on in their life, or maybe that has gone on in the past, then I might ask, right, have you talked to your doctor? Have you checked in with your MD about possible medication, right? Like, if there's an inability to get up, inability to function in the morning, inability to get their thoughts out of the hole, then we're probably going to have that conversation. So there are times that it is needed, and it helps people process or deal with what needs to be dealt with. For me, it's never a need alone, right? You can take medicine, and Abby and I talked about this this past week. Like, you could take medicine, your physician can put you on something, and it can make you feel better, and you're functioning, and all is well. But if you do not do anything to put out the fire, right, that created whatever it is that's happening, you're going to continue to develop somatic body symptoms, right? You're going to have gut issues. You're going to have things begin to happen, and at some point in time, over time, that medicine is not going to be as effective anymore. You're going to have to up the dose, or you're going to have to switch to something else because that one's no longer working, because the fire is still there, right? You have just pretty much kind of put out the smoke and not addressed the fire. So it's very, very important that you don't just medicate, which is hard, right? Because we live in this busy, fast-paced world, and we don't want to take time to do it, and it costs money. Right? If you go to therapy, I've been in therapy, my husband and I have been in therapy, I have children that have been in therapy, there's no telling what we've spent on therapy. It's a lot. It's not free most often. It does cost money, but it's very, very helpful. Or if you have a church body, which I know this church well, right, you have that here. So get in front of people. I think the first page coming into chapter 6, which again, don't know if y'all are doing that or not, so I can mention it, was take off the mask. Right? Do not come into the environment of people that know you and see you well and pretend that it's all well, because all you're doing there is spending all this energy and using fuel from your body to hide behind something. And then you're going to go home and be exhausted because you're trying to pretend to be somebody you're not, and we were never designed for that work. So thinking about the will is where oppression comes to my mind, because I think often saying all that, like, it is a spirit of oppression that comes over us. I looked up a couple of things with oppression. So it's feeling heavily burdened, weighed down, or tormented mentally by a situation or emotion. It can refer to external, heavy, or overpowering spiritual attack. It burdens the mind, the body, or the spirit with fear, doubt, heaviness, keeping people in bondage. When a person is oppressed, he or she feels overpowered by some external force, and the result is a feeling of being crushed, put down, smothered, subdued, or even tormented. Like, it is an actual spirit of oppression, right? Continuing to try to pull you in a direction, continuing to try to hold you down. When I hear that, I think of, which will weave us kind of to other areas of this book, because I know later we are going to talk about the spirit. But when I hear that feeling of being crushed, put down, and smothered, does a verse come to your mind when you hear those words? Anybody else know your word that can quote a verse that I'm thinking in my head? That's a fun game. I think it's in 2 Corinthians. 2 Corinthians 4:7. If you're taking notes, you can jot that down. It says, we have this treasure in earthen vessels so that the surpassing greatness of the power will be of God and not of ourselves. We are afflicted in every way but not crushed. We are perplexed but not despairing. We're persecuted but not forsaken, struck down but not destroyed, always carrying about in the body the dying of Jesus, so that the life of Jesus also may be manifested in our body. And so there are things that we have to know, like you're in this class tonight, and I don't know why many of you are here, whether it's you personally dealing with something like currently, right now you're walking through, or whether you've walked through it before and you just want to be able to navigate it better next time, or whether you maybe are slipping into a possible season of that, or whether you're here for family. But the important thing for me is that you're here getting educated on the ways to help you if you ever end up in a depression season, right? In a season where you have depressive symptoms showing up. I don't do a lot of diagnosing in my realm, but I do talk about symptomatic things that show up for people. So depression symptoms is how I would label them. But this is a truth, me, in my mind, having that. Like when I read this and I see that oppression tends to crush us and tends to put us down and can even feel like we're getting tormented, that idea of like it's never going to change, then the fact that the Lord drops in my mind a familiar verse that says, wait, the Bible talks about being crushed but not destroyed. Like that's what coming to me. So that's the difference, right? My will, my body might be feeling as if I'm never going to get out of this, right? I am crushed. I can't get out of this hole. I just want to be at my home by myself. I don't want to be around anybody. I don't want to talk to anybody. I don't want them to see me because they're thinking A, B, C, or D, right? Whatever the voices are in your head. But then when I think that, my spirit clicks and it says, The word talks about being crushed. What's it say? Right? So even if you can't pull where it's at, go to your concordance. Google, AI, oh my gosh, like all sorts of helpful these days. And then you go to that verse and you use that verse. The Lord says we have treasure in earthen vessels. The Lord says we're going to be afflicted in every way, but not crushed. So I'm not crushed, right? So that means if I feel crushed, if my body, my will is saying, oh, you're crushed, right? You've got nothing left. Then I can go to the word that's going to wrestle that and say, oh, no. Like my spirit man says, no, that's not true. That's not the truth I'm grabbing out of the air tonight, right? Like that's the war that has to take place, but that is what will happen in battling with your will, right? Because it is going to want to, at times, not do what you want it to, right? There's verses that talk about making the body line up and do what it's supposed to do. Abby talked about the importance of taking a walk. You're going to feel like not taking a walk, right? But take the walk. You're going to have to wrestle. It is literally like you're arguing with a friend or arguing with a kid to clean their room. How many of you have done that? Argued with a kid to clean their room. Yes, that is not fun, is it? No. Like sometimes that's what it's like to argue with ourselves, to reason with ourselves, and lean into whatever it is the Spirit's trying to tell you. You have to choose to rely on Him for the power to accomplish your goals. Abby talked about those small changes. It lists a few of those on the bottom of 67. Keep your living environment bright, cheerful, and uncluttered. I think these are important to know ahead of time. Chuck is my husband. He's here tonight. I don't know if he's ever battled depression in that way, but he likes things quiet and dark. He says that it's like sensitive to his eyes and things of that nature. So he would honestly never open the blinds, I don't think. We have blinds that close in our bedroom and then curtains that pull over top those because there's a big bright light outside that drives me nuts at night. And so the blinds are shut, the curtains are closed. Guess what I do every morning when we get up? Open them up. Who else does that? Yep. They shut at night because my neighbors will see me if not. And they open in the morning. He would never open those things if we were not married. And so that is him, and that's worked for him, but it doesn't work for some people, right? And so if you do hit a season that's harder for you, if you've already implemented these habits, these things that your will is just naturally doing, then you're going to be better off when these things do come because you're not going to have to wrestle as hard. Setting small attainable goals every day, taking a walk. Abby mentioned that. So get that in your habit. Make it something you're already doing at least 3 to 4 times a week because it is huge at developing things. I mentioned last week about getting out in the sunlight. First 15 minutes of sunrise is kind of like free red light therapy, right? If you're somebody who pays for that or thinks that'd be really cool to have one of those masks or set in a little machine, Again, that costs money. It's called a biohack. It's creating something that God actually gives us naturally in the environment. So the way you get it naturally in your environment is go out at 15 minutes, either within sunrise or sunset. That gives you free red light therapy, right? Get your eyes on the sky, not with sunglasses. It needs to go in lenses. And so get your eyes looking up, glances around, not directly at the sun, but just glancing at the sky. That lets all that come in, kicks off serotonin, gets melatonin producing, like all the things you need to help you go to sleep that night, right? So for those of you who are like, I have trouble sleeping, that would help you. It's just developing those habits ahead of time, getting that vitamin D during the day. It also mentioned write thank you and encouragement notes to others. Look for ways to help somebody each day. Somebody tell me why that's important. Why are those two things? I feel like they're odd there, but they make so much sense. Write thank you and encouragement notes to others, or looking for some way to help another person. Okay, yeah, focusing your mind on doing something positive or focusing on positive, that's good. Anything else? Okay, yeah, you are doing something good. Yeah, absolutely. Anybody else? I think those kind of covered it. Yeah. Yeah. Yes, but maybe don't touch yours. Yes. Absolutely, absolutely. Matt Chandler used to teach something, and he always talked about belly button gazers. And this is somewhat disgusting, but I feel like it has always stuck with me. That, and if you were this person, then you'll laugh. But that belly button gazers, you're constantly worried about your own belly button, like picking junk out of your belly button, right? Like this is a thing. I know. I'm like, what? But that's what he talked about in the book, and that we need to focus less on ourselves and be focused on other people, because oftentimes if something's wrong, or even if it's not, we're trying to figure out how we can be better Christians, how we can walk better, how we can be more Christ-like. It's me, 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 me. And so getting that attention on other people, on something else other than yourself, looking up instead of down in the pit, there's all sorts of analogies with that, then the Lord will absolutely bless that, and that will naturally, again, produce dopamine and give you natural things happening in your body for helping someone else. So if those are things you're already in the habit of doing, right? There's people who write encouragement notes to people or send little messages, right? If that's you and you're already doing those things and they're habitual already, then that is going to set you up for more success if you go through a hard season. On page 69, it talked about the emotions. And this is sometimes harder to talk about within the church because it's an important feature that the Lord gave us. Like he gave us our emotions. They are to help and guide us. We're going to be angry at times. We are going to be sad at times. We're going to be happy, joyful, elated, all the things. And we sometimes just don't want to get caught up in those emotions. Like we don't want to have them, or we don't want to feel them. We try to avoid them. And when how many of you have seen the movie Inside Out? Oh, very few of y'all. Yes, there's two. There's part one and part two. Part one's still my fave, but there is part one and part two. If you've not seen Inside Out, jot that in your notes and go home and make that just a cool night for you to watch that movie, because it's awesome. It's very much focused on emotional health. It was actually written and designed by two psychologists. It took about 5 years to create the first one, and so I love it. I think it's fantastic. It's used in a lot of therapy rooms, actually. And so that little girl has these 5 emotions in her head, and the movie's pretty much them kind of working the scene, and you're seeing her life from that. But the whole concept is that sadness, because she moves. She's a little girl. She moves from one town to another town, leaves all her friends, leaves her home, leaves her hockey team, right? What might she feel if that happened? Sad. And so sadness, who is super cute, this blue little creature, wants to go and touch the core emotions. But prior to this point, this little girl, Riley, has been nothing but happy her whole life. She's this happy, bouncy little girl. And so Joy, who in her emotive center, loves all the yellow. The yellow center is for happy, and then the blue is for sad. So sad wants to keep touching these core memories, which are little round balls like marbles, and when sadness touches them, then they turn blue, right? If they were yellow, they turn blue. And so there's this fear like, oh no, we cannot be sad. Our whole emotive center is going to be sad. That can't happen. And so she tries to attempt to keep Riley happy all the time, and you can imagine that's not going to work and going to go real sideways. But the thing about that is that movie really portrays very well as Riley has these core memory centers, about 5 of them off of her core brain, and those start going gray, right? Meaning she's turning off, trying to, sadness, like disconnecting it, cutting the wire. Well, the thing about that is our emotions all come from the same place. And so when you start trying to turn off one, guess what happens? You turn them all off, right? So then you don't feel anything. And then that gets very dark and very gray. It could be very maybe angry reactively in a way, or it could be very low and sad reactively in a way. And so then you are thankful because you're not feeling maybe the thing you're trying to avoid if you've gone through something difficult in your life, but you're also not letting the joy in anymore either. Like the hope is dying off as well. So again, back to that whole concept of we can't just cover up, we can't just get away from, we can't just medicate, right? We can't just avoid, put it in a box and not deal with it, because it will damage our body and will begin to do things that we're not aiming to do. The book had mentioned down at the bottom, I just thought it was a good note, so I didn't want to skip over it. Anniversary depression is a yearly recurring depression. This type of depression is an involuntary emotional reaction to past loss or trauma. It lists some examples: abortion, miscarriage, house fire, death of a spouse, child. Lasts for a limited period of time with the onset triggered by memories. Has anybody ever dealt with that? Like, just show of hands, anniversary? Yeah. And that's very healthy, very normal. I think it does get less and less over time. Triggers less and less, right? Like, it's not as reactive for me anymore as long as you're doing work, either with a therapist or with a group or with your friends or with a spouse, whatever that looks like. As long as you're working through that, that does get easier as that healing comes along. I used to say as time passes, but I don't think it's the time that actually helps that. I think it's the healing, right? It's the work that you're doing, or it's the work that you're allowing the Lord to do in your life. Okay, we're gonna, that section that's on page 71, Guided by the Spirit, so we're gonna loop that together with session 5, because I felt like that was all kind of centered on God's perspective, trying to see depression through a positive lens, understanding the purpose of it, which all involves the spirit, right? The spiritual part of our being. And so we're going to look at a couple of those questions that Abby's going to come up and do on 60 something.
72.
Thank you.
Yes, and something I neglected to say earlier, we talked about it when we were talking about this, was, medication has its place in the treatment of depression, but I always try to encourage patients that medicine can be a Band-Aid. So, if we start medication and we start, trying to boost those chemical levels to help you feel better, if you're not working through the trigger of the depression, then a lot of times the medicine's not going to be effective after so long. And she mentioned having to change medicine or increase doses. So that's what I think is really important is if you're going to start medication for depression or you're on medicine for depression, make sure you're getting in contact with a good counselor to kind of work through those things that may be making you feel down. So, okay, on page 72, the first question is Psalms 46:1 says, God is our refuge and strength, an ever-present help in trouble. So what are some common refuges that people run to when they're depressed or angry? Home. Devices, yes. Food, yeah, that's a good one. What was it? Mom, okay. Family, yes, absolutely. Yes. Sleep, that's true, yeah, absolutely. Anything else? Okay, and then question 2 was, who or what do you typically run to when you're depressed or angry, which you kind of just answered, but what are you hoping to find when you run to those things? Peace, relief. I think somebody said comfort. Absolutely. So when we run to those things, do we find those things? Sometimes. Does it last? No, right. So whenever you're feeling those thoughts of oppression or stress or depression, it's always good to run to your family, to run to people you can trust, but it's also important that we run to the Lord with those thoughts and call on Him to help us through those, because ultimately He's going to be the only one that can do that for us. So.
for me, I have not ever battled depression in the way that even close to a diagnosis, right? Like I've had down days or down weeks or down seasons, but I don't know why, right? Like I can't tell people why that is, or if it's probably a mix of things, right? I'm assuming something to do with personality, chemicals, a lot of things, and just the Lord has not allowed that particular season in my life. There's been other things, but that has not been one of them. But I do know, like, I feel it at times when I say a spirit of oppression or this thing just trying to grab you. Like, I feel it at times. I could have a down day or have plans and just at the end of the day just feel like I don't want to do anything. Like, I got no words for anybody. Don't really want a mom. Don't want a wife. Don't want to do all the things that are like my role or my responsibility. I just want to veg out on a movie on Netflix. Like, and you can just turn something on and you can just watch that. And it's as if the time evaporates while you're watching it. And it's funny or humorous or whatever it is you watch. But then when it's over, right? But it did pass the evening, right? It passed the time for me. And then I could turn around and do it the next day, right? There's been days that's happened. And I think, honestly, just from some trauma in my childhood, I have dynamics with screens to where I don't like them. So I will watch them. But, man, it's real hard for me after a number of days. I'm just like, it's just strong in me from that. And so there is something that fights it there. But after 2 or 3 days of doing that, I'm aware, like, okay, I'm numbing. Like, something's going on. I am completely doing something out of character for me. And what's it producing? Is it producing joy? Am I feeling rested? Right? Like, as a therapist, these are things I'm going to ask myself. Is it life-giving? Like, it's not that it's wrong. Is it wrong to watch a movie every now and then? Is it wrong to watch one 7 nights in a row for a week? I don't know that that's wrong. But we have to ask ourselves, is this life-taking or is it life-giving? How do you feel afterwards? If you do whatever the vice is the next day, how do you feel after that? Right? That's what I learned young in my Christian walk, is that it matters. Those things are important and they matter. What is life-giving and what is life-stealing, life-robbing, however you want to word the other side of that. So it's not that certain things are wrong or sinful, or even that the Lord told you not to do that, right? It's not even that language. But it is, what is it giving you? What are you gaining from it? How do you feel afterwards? Those are just important questions to come back to. Okay, so thinking about session 5, jumping off of, honestly, page 71, which is a little bit in the last one, guided by the Spirit. In the big print at the bottom of that page says, even in the depths of your despair and in the darkness of your depression, God is with you. And so something I see a lot in my office is finding what's true for a person. And so the 2 pieces that we're going to be looking into a little bit on session 5, a positive perspective on depression and what's God's purpose for depression. This book may answer some of those things. Like, yes, we can put a positive perspective on depression because we know, right, Romans 8:28, that God works, I cannot say this one without quoting it. We know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who've been called according to his purpose. So if you've been a believer for any amount of time, that's a verse you generally know. If you don't, learn that one, right? It's somewhat easy, and you'll hear it come up a lot. And so we know that anything we go through that he is going to use. Did he create it? Did he cause it? Right? Is he to blame for it? No, I'm not saying that at all. But I am saying he will use it for his glory. There's been things in my life that I've gone through that were very difficult, but I've been able to use them, and they've made me who I am today. So I'm very thankful for those things, even though I would have chosen not to walk that road, right? If he'd given me a choice ahead of time, I'd been like, no, thank you. But on this side of it, I can look back at a positive perspective on it. But in the counseling room, I have believers come in, and I will ask them questions like, do you have hope? And they'll say yes. Or do you believe that God can work a miracle in a second, right? Do you believe that he can turn something around? Do you believe that he's for you, right? And there's yeses to all these questions and all these things. But then as we get down underneath it, and kind of what that looks like, just to give an example, I work pretty much in present process. And so if you think about depression, anxiety, like any list of things, but depression specifically tonight, if you think about that, people are generally either worried about the future or stuck in a painful place in the past. They have a really hard time operating from the present. And so when we are worried about the future, or we are stuck in some place in the past, then we are not usually operating out of a truth that is biblical. And so if the person would say to me that, well, I believe, let me think of one, okay, so Ephesians 3:20, that God can do immeasurably more than all that we ask, think, or imagine, right? And that's according to the power that's at work within us. I love the last part of that verse, so I don't want to drop it off. If I believe that, then when I'm in a difficult scenario, I can use one from my own life that could have led somebody down to a depressive place. Chuck and I have remarried Chuck. He is not my kid's biological dad, and so he's kind of helped raise three, basically, of my kids that were in the home while we were married. And with that, he did not always do things that I thought he needed to do. Imagine that. Right? And so I could have easily, right, he doesn't operate like me. Opposites typically attract in marriage. I've learned this from my personal experience and from counseling. And so he usually moves different than I move, right? And I move quicker. I am faster. Like my body moves faster. And so I usually am like on it, and he's still thinking. And so that sometimes can be seen as, in my mind, the narrative I'm building is he doesn't care, right? Because he's not moving. He's not doing anything. Don't you see this happening? There's need. There's something that needs to be done. Why aren't you doing it? I'm right over here just taking care of it all myself. And so the story I could tell myself is he doesn't care, and this is never going to change, right? Well, if I think about just one verse, right? I could list a whole bunch of them. But if I think about just one, that God can do immeasurably more than we ask, think, or imagine, according to the power that's at work within us. But I'm over here jumping the gun and doing all the things and operating and handling stuff myself because my narrative is he's not doing anything. He doesn't care. I've done it again. He's not going to show up for my kids. Their life is going to be destroyed. Right? Like, that's the whole narrative. And I couldn't tell you that in the moment, right? Again, coming from a counselor perspective. It's not that all that's online for me in the moment, but what is online is irritation with Chuck for not doing something that he doesn't even know what he's supposed to be doing. And I'm over here handling it. And the message is you don't care, right? That's online. But what I'm operating from is a heart truth, right? Not a knowing to where I know that God can do immeasurably more than I ask, think, or imagine according to the power that's in me, right? The Holy Spirit's in me. But what I'm operating out of is I'm alone in this. Nobody's for me, and nobody's for my kids. And I will tell you that usually takes about 6 months sometimes to get to in a therapy room with a client. Because they're spinning so quick, that nervous system is so escalated, they're not aware and they can't settle. So eventually when they can actually settle, or the opposite end of that, settling could be settled too much and you've got to get them a little bit online, right? Because escalation goes either direction, either up or down. Before they can put words to that, and then we can grab a hold of that lie that you're actually believing. I'm alone. Nobody's for me. I've got to do this all by myself. Why try? I'll just watch Netflix again, right? Why get up and shower? I don't have the energy, right? You could see where this could go. And that is from a heart belief that is not true. It's not rooted in Scripture. And so that's what I do, particularly in therapy, is help slow down that escalation piece. Even when people are in depression, it's still there. We all escalate, just some up, some down. So some get faster, louder, hyper in the room. Some get slower, don't move, don't say anything, really still, right? And so we have to slow that thing down and kind of get in it, because that's present, right? That's not... I'm in the future in those moments, right? I am stuck in the past of something that's happened before in my own childhood. And then I'm also in the future of thinking this is never going to work. instead of in the present moment trying to navigate what's actually happening. Being able to language like, hey, I think I see this happening with the kids. What I really need here is this to happen. Could you do this, right? That's not happening because I'm not in that present moment. I am spinning in that piece. And so this is what I mean when I say, like, the spirit matters. You've got your mind and your will, but the spirit is for me, it is the most important piece. It matters. I've realized that when people are in the throes of depression, which is, I think, why it's seemingly important for me tonight that you guys understand how to build habits and helpful things around it. So when you do struggle with it, or when you find yourself back in that season, like, to know this is critical for me, right? Because it's going to counter everything that I'm hearing from a heart belief. It's going to question it, right? It's going to argue with it. And it's going to click in your mind to go back to the Word and find that truth, and then to use that to war against that place. And when I say war, like, there are principalities, like Ephesians 6. There are principalities. There's things in the air, right? In the room with us. There are spirits in the room that we cannot see. Okay, so demonic, angelic, both. That's a thing, right? That's in Ephesians 6. If you're like, oh my gosh, what's she talking about? Ephesians 6, go read it. It's there. And so there are things fighting to tear us down, fighting to hold us down, fighting to bury us, while there are also angelic forces fighting for our good. And so when the word is used as a sword, we're literally slinging that thing, right? But for me, it's very important that it comes out of our mouth to tear down the lies that are in the atmosphere. Because if not, you're just wrestling inside your head. You're reasoning with yourself, right? You've got the lie going on, then you've kind of got a positive thought going on. So say things out loud. Half the time, I say this often, people go to therapy and you're actually paying somebody to listen to you say things out loud that you can recognize all by yourself if you just talk out loud, right? Because you will hear it come out of your mouth. I was with someone the other day and they said out loud, like, I can't take a walk in my neighborhood by myself. I'm like, who told you that, right? Because it's a person who's afraid to do that, who's fearful that something would happen, so they like to go with a friend or a spouse or this or that. And there's really not reason for that. But to them, the truth is, I can't walk in the neighborhood by myself. I'm like, who said that? And they said, nobody. It's just what I know to be true. What? That's not true, right? What's the word say? That God is always with you. That through the Lord, anything is possible, right? Do you believe that? Or do you believe this thought that says, I can't do this? A lot of it is that simple. And Abby and I have talked, and we've had that conversation, that there are things that aren't controllable, that you can't navigate on your own when it comes to depression, when it comes to actual chemical imbalance, right? But there are so many more things that are 100% in your power to control, in your power to maneuver. I feel like in today's society, we've gotten to a place where we just put this cloak on and say, my depression or my anxiety, because it's so natural to just get medicated and think this is always going to be this way. When the word tells us things that speak totally opposite of that, but we don't believe it. Right? It's a belief mechanism that's not working or that's broken. And so in that next chapter, the positive perspective, just the few points that he states there, you need to see your life from God's perspective. That's the first one. You need to know that God has purpose for everything he allows in your life. Like, those little things right there give you hope. And the important thing about this, I think, which was the first page of session 6, saying don't put on the mask. Like, if you're in a season to where you have a hard time seeing that for yourself, and you don't have a therapist, right, because their job is to see that for you, and then oftentimes at least a doctor who's kind of walking alongside you who is also there to see that for you, then you need to have a close friend or significant other, spouse, something there that knows, right, that can be your stronger, wiser, kinder person whose brain is working a little bit better than yours in this season, that can catch you when you're talking lies out loud, right? That can speak truth to you in those moments. Have that person. The third one, you will need to know there will be times when your heart will be pressed down, but also times of restoration because God is a healer of broken hearts. That verse, he heals the brokenhearted and binds up their wounds. That speaks so much to what we're talking about tonight. Either you believe that or you don't. It is as simple as that for me. There are all these other aspects that are important to speak to and to have language to, but what you believe matters. And sometimes what we know in our head, and I struggle with this, there are things that I don't fully believe yet that Scripture tells me. So there's things I know in my head, but the distance to my heart of how I'm living out of that through my nervous system shows up very different. So he heals the brokenhearted and binds up their wounds. If you're struggling tonight in this season and you're just not sure that God's ever going to meet you there or you're ever going to get healing that you need, write this verse down. Like practically what this looks like, you take it home, you find you some cool construction paper. If you don't have that, just a piece of notebook paper, anything will work. Find you a big black marker or something that you're going to be able to see it with, colorful if you're that person, and you write the verse down. He heals the brokenhearted and he binds up their wounds, and you put it somewhere where you're going to see it, right? If you need to see it multiple times, then you write it 4 or 5 times and you put it around your house. Our house has multiple verses in it. There were seasons of my life that I literally had to go to where I knew that verse was and stand in front of it and say, I know that God heals the brokenhearted and he binds up their wounds. It wasn't this verse for me. It was 2 Corinthians 4:16 through 18. But I still know those verses today. You want to learn Scripture? You don't have to like rote memorize it and say it over and over again. You find one that you need and you put it on the wall and you walk to it and you allow the Holy Spirit to ignite that thing from within you, because that's what he does, right? It's not me. I didn't get through those seasons on my own. It was the power of God. And that cool verse that I keep saying in Ephesians 3:20, because I think it's so needed when we talk about these things, the latter part of that, God's able to do immeasurably more than we ask, think, or imagine, according to the power that's at work within us. Are you letting his power work through you? Right? Are you aware that you carry that inside of you and that he is going to work through you to bring healing? That's how he does it. It's not from some just whoop, right? It is most often through a believer giving a word, saying a thing, coming and praying over you some kind of way. It is usually through another believer. The next one, you need to know that no matter how great your despondency, God can open your eyes to his unique design for your life. Most often with depression, the sun just kind of goes down is kind of my language for it.